We've been looking at essential Christian words that are sometimes so overused that their meaning and significance gets fuzzy. Grace is the chief candidate for this. You will hear people say things like be filled with grace or show more grace. Books are entitled Grace-Based Parenting or Grace-Based Discipline or Grace-Filled Parenting. I think all of those. You will hear people proclaim, we need less rules, more grace, or we need our daily grace, or even grace fills the gaps, or we say grace at a meal, or talk about reckless grace, or messy grace, or fresh grace, and on and on and on and on it goes. Grace is quite possibly the most overused word of all biblical words. And its meaning becomes hard to nail down with any certainty, with any biblical certainty, the more we use it. And some think of grace as a substance, kind of like a green spiritual juice that fills and empowers you, often expressed when people say they need to be filled with grace. Others think of grace as an attitude they have to have, so that they say they have to give grace or show grace. Many evangelicals think of grace simply as leniency. Grace means that you can bend rules and get away with it because it's a God of grace. But none of those are biblical grace. For grace is not what we do. Grace is not what we must do. It is not our effort or an allowance we have or an item we have or a license we're given. For it's not about us. Grace in the Bible is God's attitude. Listen, the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. For from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. Or if it is by grace, it is no longer on the base of works, meaning your works. Or you are justified by his grace as a gift through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. Grace itself is approval. Grace is care. Grace is an inclination of favor towards someone. Grace is a liking even for someone. Grace in general is what a father feels when he looks at a room crowded with kids and then he spots his own and is drawn towards his own and goes to his own because it's his kid. That's grace. And when we talk about God, grace is how God is orientated towards us. Grace is how God acts towards us because of his orientation towards us. Grace is not God's power supply that you've got to plug into, or grace is not your actions. Grace is always in the Bible God's good will. God's good will. So when we say that we are saved by grace, it means we are saved by God's good will towards sinners. The theologian Louis Berkhoff said it best when he said, God's grace is the bestowal of God's kindness on one who has no claim on that kindness. Yeah, that's it. His kindness changes everything. For you, Christian, swim in a sea of that kindness. And nothing you have ever done, earned, or could own that sea. But it is only an idiot that ever wants to own the sea. The child simply wants to enjoy it. And that reminds us of our need to confess. For all those times we think that the good we get is a good we deserve or have a right to. So hear this from Psalm 51. I acknowledge my transgressions, and my sin is always before me.